Finding a hungry crowd. Off the bat, I want to talk about two key concepts when it comes to finding a hungry crowd. One is that we have to understand that the market is always going to be the strongest variable in how much money you make, right? If you're selling toilet paper during COVID, you're going to sell out, right? Because it didn't matter how good your toilet paper was, there was a starving crowd. And so supply demand, which is one of the reasons that we have it as our logo, it is the strongest force in all of economics and business. It is the core thing that everything else is built on. And so you have to understand that the market is number one. If I was trying to sell services to newspaper companies, well, newspaper companies are decreasing by 25% per year, compounding negatively in the wrong direction. The next lever on this is the offer that you give people, right? If you have a superior offer, then if you're in a normal market, that'll be the next lever that you have. If I say, hey, start for free, and I only get paid if you get some sort of result, and it's a truly free, low risk, amazing value, and you get results tomorrow offer, then you're gonna sell 10 times, 100 times more than someone who just has like a, you pay me, and maybe you get results, and maybe you don't type of service or product. The final thing is your ability to persuade. Ideally, go after a really big market with an amazing offer and be a hell of a persuader. But the thing is you can be terrible at persuading and have a terrible offer and say you can only buy my toilet paper in 80 roll chunks or I'm not gonna sell it to you and still sell out during COVID. But if it's not COVID, then it's how can I make the toilet paper offer that I have significantly more compelling? And if all the toilet paper offers look the same, then it just comes down to how well I can persuade people to buy mine. That's concept one when it comes to finding a hungry crowd. Concept two is the four things that I look for when I'm actually trying to find that market. Number one is I want people who are in pain. You want to make sure that the people that you're selling to are in desperate need. They don't want, but must have the thing that you are selling. The second is that they must have the ability to buy. So purchasing power. So a friend of mine had a business where he helped people who were unemployed fix their resumes so that they could get a job. Now, you might be like, oh wow, tons of pain, absolutely. But the problem was he kept trying to grow this business and he couldn't grow it because they were all broke because they didn't have a job. The third factor that I look for is easy to target. Because at the end of the day, even if you have somebody who's in lots of pain who can buy your thing, if you can never find them, it doesn't matter because they're never gonna buy your thing because they'll never know you exist. And so if I have the choice between two different marketplaces and one of them is like nurses, incredibly easy to find, or something that is way harder to find, like psychedelic Aztecs in Croatia, way harder to target. And you know what? They might have a huge pain and lots of purchasing power to buy my thing, but if I can't find them, it's irrelevant. The fourth point you want to have is that you have a growing market. Now I gave the example earlier about the newspapers, right? So believe it or not, a good friend of mine actually had a business that sold a rev share model to newspapers. So he was an amazingly persuasive guy. He had an amazing offer, which was zero risk. He just said like, let me get a percentage of the revenue that I bring to you. All right, so these two things were completely maxed out, but he couldn't figure out why his company wasn't growing every year. He was beating his competitors and gaining more customers than they were, but still slipping away in terms of his ability to grow. And it was because the entire marketplace as a whole was shrinking. And so you wanna make sure that you have all four of these things. You can't just have three of them or two of them or one of them. You need to have all four. And so when you're thinking about what thing you wanna sell, start with who you wanna sell it to. So you have your hungry crowd, now what do? One avatar, one product, one channel. This is the simplest formula to getting to $1 million plus. All you have to do is find one person that you want to help. It's just making sure that you're very clear on the one very specific person that you are going to help. That is the avatar. The next thing is you want to give them one product. And the reason I say it's one product is that a lot of people overcomplicate their businesses too early. They're like, man, if I want to double my business, I should sell them 3 things, right? And then I'll get them to buy more stuff. But the thing is that if you're under $1 million, you're just adding a ton of complexity when you don't even have that many customers. And so most times you'd be better served sticking with the one thing that you're selling and saying, how can I sell 3 times as many of the exact same person? And that becomes the problem that you solve. But most people get confronted with these issues and then go for the easy route. And again, this is like that building where you can add something on top really quickly, but it doesn't create the skyscraper that you want. Instead, you want to think, how can I do more? The third variable here is channel. Now, it doesn't matter what channel you're currently acquiring customers on. You can hit $1 million plus on literally any channel that you advertise on without going onto new channels. So if you do outreach, as in you reach out to people one-on-one to get customers, whether that's cold calls, cold emails, DMs, you can expand and continue to get more customers with that one channel. If you post content, you can keep posting content on whatever channel you're on and just do it better. Post more content, post better content. And by doing so, you'll increase the amount of customers, still with only one money-making product. Or let's say you're running ads. Obviously, if you're running ads, you can just spend more money on the ads, provided you're doing it profitably. And if you can't expand past $1 million a year profitably with paid ads, you have a business problem or you have a pricing problem. You don't actually need to add another channel, because then it again complicates your business, because you're like, okay, well, I'm currently doing, $500,000 a year on YouTube. You know what I'm gonna do? You might think, oh, I'm gonna start doing cold emails, right? As my next way of getting customers. Well, that majorly complicates your business when you're this early on. Now you might be thinking, wait, shouldn't I have diversity of how you acquire customers? I thought you said that was a good idea. It is, but you're so small, it doesn't matter yet, because you're not looking at a potential acquirer who's gonna try and look to decrease risk. For you, you just need to get better at doing the one thing that you do well, because you're really probably not that good yet. And as terrible as that may sound, it's probably real, all right? And so the fastest way to get to the million is to build it right from the get-go and not overcomplicate your business, which means you pick one avatar, one product, and one channel that you focus on until you get there. So now we go back to our tactics of building our first $1 million. The next thing at level 2 is our offer. Now, I wrote an entire book on this thing, $100 million offers. It answers the question, what should I sell? And it's because that's the most common question that I get asked every single day for people who are trying to start a business, which makes sense. What am I supposed to sell? So I call this the value equation. Now, fundamentally, you've probably heard all over the internet, you need to provide value. You gotta give value, right? But the question is, what is value? And after doing a lot of studying of figuring this out between our portfolio companies, it actually comes down to 4 variables. Variable number 1 is the dream outcome. What the dream outcome is for whoever the prospect that you pick is, the way that you can compare 2 different dream outcomes is how much more valuable do they think one outcome is versus another. If I were to talk to a 30-year-old man and say, hey, I can help you lose weight or I can make you a millionaire, most guys would value being a millionaire more than, let's say, being handsome. There are different outcomes that people will ascribe different values to. And that's just a very extreme example. Well, let's use the weight loss example and let's switch it to women. If I have one ebook that helps someone lose weight, and then I've got a one-on-one personal training program that helps someone lose weight, it's the same dream outcome. So then what then determines which one is more valuable? Because the ebook might be $50 and be overpriced, and the personal training might be $5,000 and be underpriced. How can you make that discrepancy? Because there's more value. Let me explain. The next one is perceived likelihood of achievement, meaning when I buy, how likely do I think I will get what I want through buying? If I buy a $50 ebook on good meals that I can cook that are healthy, maybe I'll get some food that I might like in here and I can feel a little better about myself. But they don't realistically think that they're gonna all of a sudden transform their entire body from a $50 ebook. Now, if you sign up for personal training for a year, you probably have a way bigger perceived likelihood of achievement, and so you value it higher. Now, both of these elements, the dream outcome and the perceived likelihood of achievement, are the things that you want to increase in your communication with a prospect. You're saying it's really, really likely that you're gonna get this thing that you really, really want. The next 2 variables of the equation are the painful side of the equation, which is what does someone have to give up in order to get it? So the first thing that we have is time. And there's 2 elements of time. There's micro and macro. Micro is how long is this gonna take every day? There's a certain amount of time that's gonna take on the micro for them to experience the result, right? So if I'm talking about the lady who's doing personal training, she might have to go to the gym 3 times a week. That's gonna take time. She might have to prepare food. That's gonna take time. That's on the micro level. On the macro level, how long is she gonna have to do these micro commitments in order to get the macro result that she wants? She might have to lose 50 pounds and it might take her 18 months. So macro, the goal is I want this to be as little as possible micro time, and I want this to be as short as possible on the macro, so that when I say, hey, you're gonna get the dream body you want, you absolutely know that you're gonna get it, and it's gonna happen really, really fast. So the next thing is effort and sacrifice. Effort is what you have to start doing that you weren't doing, that you don't want to do as a result of the purchase. Sacrifice are things that you have to stop doing that you wish you could do, but can't do anymore as a result of the purchase. And so for our lovely young lady, she's gonna have to sacrifice Margarita Mondays and Taco Tuesdays. She's no longer gonna be able to get to do that even though she wants to do that. She's gonna have to sacrifice sleeping in on the weekends, and she's gonna have to start waking up early and working out and eating food that she doesn't like. And so effort and sacrifice tend to be dual sides of the same coin. Whatever you have to start doing, you typically have to stop doing something else. The top side, we try and increase. The bottom side, we try and decrease. We want to get it to 0. Because if you think about this in a hypothetical extreme, the perfect offer that would have the absolute most value would be the biggest, most compelling dream you can possibly imagine that you're absolutely guaranteed to get instantly with no effort. So if I said you can click a button on my website and then look down at your abs and then have a six-pack, that would be the hypothetical extreme value. Now, people can get that through personal training, changing their diet, and waiting 12 months. But because of this, the value is significantly decreased because there are costs associated. Understanding all four of these variables is how you craft offers that get people to say yes and give you money. Because oftentimes, the most expensive part of the offer that you have isn't the money. It's the other things that they have to start doing as a result of the purchase. Those are called hidden costs. If I have a marketing agency, okay, and I do content for people, all right, and when I start doing content, I say, okay, it's gonna take us 60 days to ramp up. We're gonna start having 2 calls a week for an hour. You're gonna have to fly out to my studio and we're gonna record. And it's gonna take 60 days before you're gonna start seeing any kind of traction. Imagine that offer compared to somebody who says, you don't need to do anything. I can just draw stuff on my own, immediately start posting, and your phone's gonna ring today. Well, shoot, which one's more valuable? It's still the same core services, but how we wrap them make them probably 10 times more valuable than they were before. And that's why understanding these variables and making the right offer is so compelling on your road to your first million. And the reason this was my first book is that Offers is about strategy. Offers is one of the largest levers that you can pull with any business because it actually affects all departments. When you change the offer, it changes how you market. When you change the offer, it changes the sales script, the sales process. When you change the offer, it changes what you deliver. It literally affects everything. And so for us, we always try and nail this with our portfolio companies at acquisition.com. To be clear, we don't sell coaching. We invest in businesses and buy them. And for context, our average portfolio company over the first 12 months, 1.8x is revenue and 3.01x is profit. And over their first 24 months, they 2.8x revenue and 4.7x profit, meaning that they disproportionately drop the increase in revenue to their bottom line because we make sure that the thing that we are selling is as valuable as humanly possible. So the next on our journey of wealth and riches and glory and status and all things amazing is marketing and sales. And if you think about this from a sequence perspective, you have to make the thing and then you have to promote the thing. Now, the making the thing is $100 million offers. What should I sell? The next question is, who should I sell it to? AKA getting leads. And you get leads through advertising, which is the concept of my second book, $100 million leads. And then you get them to buy. But the thing that people mess up is that they then think, okay, I'm gonna do more of that. But what you actually need to do next is you go back to here and you fix the product and keep making it better. And then you promote it more. And then you come back and fix the product and make it better. And it becomes this virtuous cycle. So if we need to understand how to market and sell, then it means that you have to have one advertising method. There are 8 ways you can advertise. There's 4 that you can do, and then there's 4 that other people can do for you. You can do warm outreach, which is reaching out one-to-one to your friends. You can post content one-to-many, but to people who know you. You can run paid ads, which is doing one-to-many to strangers, or you can do one-to-one to strangers, which is cold outreach. And if you're like, man, no one's buying my thing, I can guarantee you that you're not doing enough of these core 4. Period. That's it, because these are the only 4 things that you can do to advertise. The next thing is that you can get referrals from customers, which are lead getters. Next, you can have employees who help do the core 4 for you. You can have agencies who run the core 4 for you, make content for you, do outreach for you. All of those things you can hire another business to help you with. And then finally, you've got affiliates, which some people call influencers, some people call endorsements, but it's somebody who already has an audience, already has a business, and then you compensate in some way to do the advertising for you, the core 4, to let other people know about your stuff. These are the 8 ways that you can advertise anything to anyone. And the nice thing is when you're starting out for your first million, just pick one. Once you pick the advertising method that you want, and let's say you're using lead getters, you have to learn one of the core 4 to then get lead getters. And that's okay, that's fine, that's part of business. These will always give you more leverage than the first 4, and that's okay. But you have to start with these first. So let's assume that you're just gonna stick to the core 4 in the beginning because you're like, I don't wanna involve other parties, which I recommend, especially if you're starting out. And you're like, you know what, I'm going to post content. That's what you're gonna do, that's your method. All right, now you're gonna have all these people who like your posts, comment on your posts, DM you personally when you make content that they find compelling or interesting and say, hey, I'd love your help on whatever this thing is. Then you transition into sales. Now, it's so important for founders who are starting a company to be integrally involved in both of these processes. The reason you want the founder to be integrally involved in the beginning is one, it's cheaper, and especially when you have less cash, that makes sense. Two, these are skills that are going to be required for you to succeed over the long haul. So you're going to want to understand them at a tactical level, because when you bring someone else in the future, these lead getters, whether it's employees, agencies, affiliates, or whatever, you can teach them the right way to do it. And when they say, hey, that's not possible, you can be like, no, it is. Let me show you how. And then you have a litmus test of who's legit and who's not, who's going to help you on your journey. Whether you're hiring them or you're incentivizing them, it works the same. When it comes to the sales side, we want to get into a choreographed process, knowing what step 1 through letter Z of the process looks like to get someone from, I think this might be interesting, to giving you money. But if you don't know what you're doing first, you have to throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks. And a lot of it's just going to be your gut in the beginning and figuring out, whoop, that didn't work, whoop, that didn't, oh, that one actually got a response. All right, that's step 2. And you keep trying until you get to step 3, and then you keep trying until you get to step 4, until eventually somebody gives you money. And then you backtrack and say, what happened to this person that did these steps? Great, now I'm going to try and recreate that as many times as I can, and then that becomes your process. And that process repeats at each micro level too, because that might be 3 or 4 steps to get to the conversation where someone might give you money. And then what do you do in that conversation? Well, when I ask this question first, and this question second, and this question third, it's more likely that they ultimately buy. And so if you don't follow a script in the beginning, you better make one, because if you're going to eventually get out of sales, which you should if you want to scale, then you're going to be able to teach somebody else how to sell too. And one of the biggest issues early on is that the founder is the most convicted about the product, and you should be, it's your company. But people who come after you are never going to be as charismatic or as convicted in the thing that you have as you are, which means you need to follow a process to maximize the likelihood that the prospects that they speak with ultimately purchase. The next level in our blueprint or journey to wealth, the mountain of Mordor, and by Mordor I mean more money, is paying yourself. How much should you pay yourself? When should you pay yourself? Of all the topics we're going to talk about today, this is probably the most subjective. And the reason for that is because it underlines one key concept that is 100% personal, which is risk tolerance, which is how much risk are you willing to take individually. One of the regrets that I have earlier on as I continued to double down on my gym chain was that I took all the profit from each gym and I kept putting it into the next gym, and I basically took nothing out for the entire time. Now, that's super risky. I was living on nothing, living cheap, I was eating cheap, I had a cash car that I owned outright, and I just put everything I had, spent every hour of my day growing my business. Eventually though, I ended up losing all the money from selling all my gyms and was left with nothing. And if I had taken out some cash during that period of time, I would have had 2 benefits. Benefit number 1 is that when you really try and take out cash flow from the business, you'd be amazed at how much cash flow just magically appears. And so I like having bank account PRs be a good personal goal for every entrepreneur. Even if the increment that you're increasing is small, it does 2 things. 1, it forces you to take cash out of the business. So it forces cash flow. The second is that it forces you to decrease your spending personally. And I have a strong belief that as you're coming up, learning the discipline to spend less, if you increase the cash flow that you take out of the business and you spend less over time, then your bank account has nowhere to go but up. And I can promise you that when you have a very full bank account, business decisions become less stressful. And when you make less stressed decisions, you make better decisions. I do believe in taking some money out of the business along the way, because let's be real, you're going to live a long life and then you're going to die. And if you double down every single minute until the day that you died, you'd build the most enterprise value, but you'd live a really shitty life. So at some point, you have to balance the investment versus consumption of life itself, or the fruit of your labor. That is why I'm a believer in at least allocating a certain percentage of the cash flow from the business to you personally. A healthy way of thinking about this that we have for some of our heavy capital intensive businesses, meaning like brick and mortar chains, which is one of the biggest parts of our portfolio. This is one backup napkin way that you can use. 33% goes to you, 30% goes to growth, which is new locations. And then this is rainy day. This is cash reserves for the business, cash reserves for you, and this is for new locations. Another way of doing it is something called a watermark. We know that we need to grow 2 locations, and this is a proxy. It doesn't have to be 2 locations. You could be hiring 2 people, hiring 2 reps, it doesn't matter. Or 2 more developers if you're a software company, it works the same. 2 more per month costs X dollars. We have Y profit. So all we do is we say, whatever the profit is at the end of the month, we subtract this, and then we have a watermark above which we always leave in the account. And then everything else, we distribute as cash flow. That's a different way of doing it. This is a little bit more aggressive if you want to maintain a certain growth rate. This one is a little bit more flexible. It really depends on you and your tolerance for risk. And that's one one thing that I'd say I pride myself on in terms of our ability to help portfolio companies and newer founders who are creating their first kind of generational wealth is these are hard conversations to have and are really important conversations to have. And you want somebody who isn't a financial advisor who's trying to get you to take as much cash out so that they can invest and get their 1% fee. You want somebody who's on the same side of the table as you, being like, I get where you're at, I can see where your wealth is, and also sees over the next 24, 36, 60 months what it looks like for us to just have that one big bloop so you never have to work again. We're now approaching the second level of wealth, the pinnacle of our second level, which is setting goals. And I think this is a really misunderstood topic. Most people think like, oh, I need SMART goals or specific measurable goals. Bad. I'll show you how I do that. All right, so rather than focusing on outcomes, we focus on activities. So the goal shouldn't be what happens, but the goal should be what we do. I had a buddy of mine, so they started doing 10 grand a month, 20 grand a month, 30 grand a month. And then he would fall off. And I was like, why do you keep falling off? He said, well, I make the money and I hit my goal, so then I like ease off the gas pedal. And I said, it's because you're defining your goals the wrong way. I see you as not hitting your goal every time you're not doing the activities. And so I said, make the activities the goal, and then you'll hit it every time and more. And so then he flipped how he saw his own success into simply, at the end of the day, did he do all the things that he said he was going to do at the beginning of the day? And then you can actually control your inputs, because inputs are what drive outputs. Don't make the goal outputs. Say, what am I going to do that would be unreasonable that I don't hit these outputs? So for example, my inputs might be, and this is one of my favorite ways for thinking about like advertising, is something that I call the rule of 100. So the rule of 100 simply states that if you do 100 primary actions over 100 days, you'll usually get the first result that you ultimately want. Now you hook people by saying you're going to get the first result you want, but the key point is that you're doing 100 actions. And one of my little monikers that I would share with you is count in hundreds. All right, so when a lot of people are like, man, I did the thing. How many hundreds did you do? If I was doing warm reach outs, I'd say, cool, reach out to 100 friends a day. If I'm doing cold reach outs, I'd say, cool, reach out to 100 people a day. If I'm making content, cool, make 100 minutes of content every day. If I'm running ads, I'd say, run $100 a day. And each of those are activities that we can say, these things will drive these outputs. They make that the goal. And so at the end of the day, you can say, yes, I did it, or no, I didn't do it. Not, did I make a sale? Because no matter what, even if you didn't make a sale today, you should still do your 100 inputs so that you can make 2 sales tomorrow. So the second concept I'm going to talk to you about when it comes to goals is how we actually set goals for portfolio companies. And it's not the way that you think, but it is something that you're going to recognize because we actually use the scientific method. And here's how it works. 4 simple boxes. 1 is, what problem are we actually trying to solve? A lot of times we spend the most time on this part of this because a lot of times people are like, oh, I think we need to redo our logo. Why? What is that going to accomplish? What constraint are we alleviating? Right? Because for us, we back our goals into the constraints of the business. Because let's say that conversion rate on our homepage is not a problem. Well, then why do we need to redesign the logo? Oh, we don't. One of my favorite ways to solve problems is to decide they're not a problem to begin with. So this is column number 1, which is what problem are we solving? The second is, what's our hypothesis, which is an if-then statement. X, then Y. So what that means is, I say, my hypothesis is, if our website is low conversion, that's the problem that we're solving. My hypothesis is that if we redesign the website, we will then get increased conversions. And then all we have to do is say, how do we measure X and Y? How do I measure that we redesigned it? I could say, yes or no, I did it. Or I could say that we hold a split test every Monday that we run over the quarter. That would be the X. That's something I could say, yes or no, we did it. And then Y, my conversion rate, let's say we're at 10%. And then I would say, is it greater than 10%? Yes or no? And then finally, the last thing is, did we do it? And then did it work? We figure out the problem we're solving. We figure out what our hypothesis is to solve it. We determine how we're going to measure whether or not we did or whether or not it happened. And then we say, did we do the thing? And then did it happen? Because we could not do the thing and then it wouldn't matter and we'd have to repeat it later and solve the problem of why are we not doing this thing. But if we did do the thing, then either it improved it or maybe we redesigned the website and the conversion rate didn't improve. So either that might not be the constraint or our hypothesis was wrong. And so this allows you to iteratively improve the business.